what do you guys want to talk about? Any other questions? We were trying to kind of field the chat questions as we got them this time, which is a little different. Normally we ask people to wait to talk until the end, and we did do that this time, and I think it worked out pretty nicely because this was much more of a discussion topic as opposed to Jeff and I presenting something very specific, because this is such a broad topic.
Kind of felt the conversation was right, especially as newer chemistries start to get to like a fruition or a point when you have like decisions, right? Like everybody's waiting on whatever the new lithium ion battery chemistry is, and we're not gonna, we kind of have to get to that point where we have to understand what is the supply, what is the domestic resources for that new chemistry, right? Like, I don't know about you guys, but I don't think like LZO lithium metal solid state is exactly the most domestically supplyable resource.
Especially for
could be wrong.
So I don't know about everybody else, but for at least for the two sort of chat roulettes that I had at the beginning of today, like half of the people in each one were basically involved in some way right now in the mining, refining, or recycling space. And to me, that's really interesting because as one of the people earlier put it, basically like 3 years ago, nobody was talking about lithium mining. And now everyone's talking about lithium mining and lithium refining and all the new processes and the components and the cost. So Jeff and I chose to talk about this maybe 3 months ago and started like putting together what it would be about and how to do it and looking at stuff. And it turned from like, 20 slides on just the mining refining to like 180.
Yeah, that's
about how many did we show you guys today? And like we very judiciously were cutting stuff out. We only showed you about 25 today. We're going to try to keep it equivalent for the one next time by just cluttering single pages with lots of stuff and talking to it. But the mining refining is just so complicated. And there's so many different ways to do it and options and locations, and the pricing is very hard to put together too.
Is this a series of talks that you give?
Yeah, this will be a two-part, and I guess as a macro level, this is like our 20th-ish video that we've done through Battery Brunch, and all of those are up online on a YouTube channel called Battery Talk. So we've done everything. Yeah, so we've done everything from like fun science battery companies to all the big players in silicon batteries, so like Amprius, Innovix, Innovate, Silicon 14, sort of like dives on the companies and their technologies. A couple other battery basics, just sort of like 101 on different types of information or chemistries. We're going to do a safety one pretty soon, and this is part 1 and our part 2 on lithium. So yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, Aubert.
Hey, Sergio, how you doing?
How are you? Good. I can give you my 5 cents on lithium battery and the new.
You're breaking up pretty badly. I can't hear you.
Okay,
could you type your question in chat?
No, wait a second. Okay. I will. How about now? Much better?
That's much better. Yeah.
It's the Zoom setting. I wanted to give you my 5 cents on the lithium mining industry and the new gold rush for the new white gold. Me being Argentine, I had to suffer this daily in the newspapers, and I don't have any proof, but I have a strong perception of a big misunderstanding of the lithium batteries by the industry. Most of the decision makers in that industry, they think that the minerals that go into electric vehicles are consumables. And they are not. Every single gram of all minerals that go into the battery, especially the metals, are fully recyclable. So we expect to see the demand curve to flatten at some point.
Yeah,
right?
That's a good conversation, Sergio, and a good point.
And the biggest piece there is cost, right? Because they all are, there's a chemical process or way to get them all out. But right now, you basically shred them and burn them and get black mass, and then the process of doing that economically burns away the lithium, right? That's sort of what people do right now, or contaminates it to the point, like even the other process is contaminated to the point where it's more expensive to then reconstitute it as a battery grade material than to get new stuff. And that's the problem. So the subsidies and the economic incentives need to actually enable the recycling. And the last piece of it, and this is the big problem, is that basically demand's doing this and supply's doing this, but the recycling is going to be on 2 to 10 year old production. And so when you look at the graph, right, of this, you're recycling here for this year. And so basically it's such a small fraction of what's being done until the market hits equilibrium, which is not going to do anytime soon. But I agree with you, very long term, with the right science and the right cost structure, we could recycle everything and make a closed loop system. The thing that terrifies me is how bad we have done as a civilization at doing that for every other industry ever. And I really don't want lithium ion batteries to be the same. And that's what scares me, is that it's going to be a throwaway commodity product that we're dumping an enormous amount of the world's resources into doing, and polluting hugely in the process, and then turning them into a throwaway commodity.
Yeah, I mean,
consumer electronics.
Well, I had to disagree. The other industry and the steel industry and all the other metals that go into a car have been extremely successful in recycling. All the cars we are driving today probably have like zero out of mind metals.
So the big issue here really isn't so much that recycling lithium is extremely hard from a scientific point of view, and like Aubert said, on a long term, the real difficulty here that nobody brings up is the shipping. You have a slightly dead battery pack. It's got a UN. You got to put something that's extremely heavy on a truck from halfway across the country, ship all those things to a supplier at cost,
with
not
insurance.
have any fires, have insurance, and recycle it. Remember the original analogy, guys. You produce a battery for $8. Everything that happens to that battery after it was sold for $8 must come in cheaper than it being made again. So that means you have to somehow, let's assume 10% margin. So it's what? $7.20.
That's a high assumption. That's a high assumption in batteries.
5% margin.
Zero.
$7.50-60 is what it costs to make the battery. That means after you sold it for $8, to get the same margin, you have to do everything to that battery after its end of life for less than $7.60, or at $7.60. Think about that for a second.
Jeff and Aubert and Sergio, the thing is that all people who push recycling assume that battery producers should pick up the cost of recycling. Yes, theoretically speaking, it works, but believe me, as a person who worked over 20 years for Duracell, I know that Duracell would be broke if you pay for recycling.
No, yeah, that's the truth.
So, one quick thing I just want to share on exactly that is I went to the Stanford SLAC Energy Institute event a couple weeks ago, and they had a section talking about basically recycling lithium-ion batteries. And I'm trying to find the quote really quickly, but there's a wonderful quote by one of the gentlemen there, Professor Winter, I believe, that basically said that the problem with recycling in batteries is really simple. We've known it all along. Just put 1 kilogram of gold in every battery and the problem will take care of itself, right? And that's kind of the joke in the industry is, especially for LFP, there's not enough value in the materials to be worth recycling, and everyone has pivoted to LFP. If we were still doing, higher cobalt content batteries like LCO, that makes complete sense to do recycling economically. That would be amazing. But LFP is basically worthless to recycle. You get the copper, and if you can get the lithium out, you can get the lithium. But it's more expensive to do that by an order of magnitude, not including the shipping, insurance, and all that other crap, than it is to just get new stuff. I mean, that's what scares me.
I think the main message here I was really trying to take away, guys, is the economics of the situation is driving the decisions. It's not what our wants are. I think we are fully aligned on the want that we should be able to recycle these batteries and extract all the materials back out of them so we can make a nice circular economy. But the reality is that the economics aren't there for it. And the suppliers of batteries margins are so low that there is no, no fat left on the meat for them to actually like consider that as a thing and develop that internally and pay for it. And then two, there is so much focus on reducing the cost of EVs and all these other applications for the batteries that go into them that the resources just aren't there to think about recycling, right? If you look at like Redwood Materials, which is the big recycling company right now, really all they do is just recycle the copper. That's basically all they do. They're a giant copper producing company at this point in time, and they're heavily government subsidized, which is why they're being able to do that and actually make a little bank for it. It's like we said, you got to insure and transfer heavy batteries by the bulk all the way to Nevada. That's just not cheap.
Well, as one perspective, our recycling company recovers lithium, nickel, cobalt, and copper. And we also don't transport the batteries because we shred them mobily on site, blast, freeze, and shred. We have a very high fraction of recovered material as well, over 95%.
That might drop the insurance cost, but that doesn't drop the weight, right? It's like even if you shred it, unless you're doing processing on site, you're still masses conserved, right? It's just the
One thing one thing I have to say, and this might be the first time in the history of anything we've done for Battery Talk where I have to say it, is I've actually invested in Luke's company. So I have to be very clear when I say anything about that. I put about $1,000 in your guys's stock offering.
Yep.
I think what they're doing is really cool. And basically it's a mobile truck shredder that solves the problem of having to handle the hazardous batteries, basically handle them with people that are not trained, like localized storage locations within cities and states where you're basically accumulating a bunch of things where if one goes off, they all go off, and then having to transport them to another location. I really like what they're doing. And because of that, I'm going to keep my mouth shut about anything else that Luke says.
Yeah, I mean, it's just to get to the point, that gets rid of the insurance, right? Cost of transporting things that can pop into flames, but it doesn't necessarily change the mass argument. Right?
Well, we have an 80,000 pound limit for the truck without needing special permits. And
Yeah.
so our payload is around 25,000 pounds of batteries that we can shred and process at a time, which makes the route for the truck to drive very cost effective.
Mhm.
You know, each time you pick up 25,000 pounds, it definitely pays for the expenses and the driver and all that with the materials recovered. So I see it working personally, even with the weight.
I mean, I guess my question would be, what would be the cost of gas inside of that truck to travel across the country with that weight load?
Well, we're definitely using an electric truck. And the cool thing is EV batteries aren't actually
So the truck is
in the-
heavier. So it's a 55,000 pound truck with a 25,000 pound weight load is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, actually, so the real problem, Luke, is that you need to wait for the charging infrastructure for cross state to be in effect before you guys can implement this. That's the real problem.
The thing
right?
is, cross state and the rest of the country isn't really where the EV batteries are. If you look at a heat map of EV battery registrations, there's a hotspot around the LA area, a hotspot in the Bay Area, a hotspot around Portland, and a hotspot around Seattle. And the whole breadbasket, the whole middle of the country has far less EVs than just the LA area. The entire mid of the country has less EVs than just the LA area by registration. And so right now the truck need to travel super far isn't there. And it might become there as the middle of the country starts buying EVs, but it's not the case yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the issue.
Luke, how do you look at LFP versus nickel rich in your economics, and how do you compare those?
Yeah, well, LFP, when the price of lithium was really high, like a month ago, worked out pretty nicely. But with a low lithium price, LFP basically only yields you lithium and copper for value, which is tough to run in the black on if you're only digesting LFP. Again, it depends on the lithium price. So when lithium price goes up, recycling LFP is profitable. When it goes down, it becomes not profitable.
Yeah, it's a hard problem, guys. It's just,
And I think Luke also just presented, in some ways, one of the most optimistic, efficient, localized solutions to this problem. And still with LFP, depends on the conditions, not profitable without subsidies or penalties, which was really kind of the point of our whole presentation, which is just for priming for next time, that basically the government subsidies and the government penalties for not recycling need to actually enable this. And that's kind of the core way to maybe help solve the problem.
So far, we've never got a single government dime for either of our companies, including battery recycling. And one of the reasons that they said we weren't eligible for grants was because the diversity, equity, inclusion portion of the grant, despite being a Native American woman-owned business and all that, it says you have to have at least 60% of the workforce in a union for your industry to get the grant. And so somehow being in a union is related to diversity, equity, or inclusion, apparently. But since
It's related to lobbying.
Sure, yeah, that's right. It's directly related to lobby money, yeah. So since there are no battery recycling unions, and at a research and development phase, I certainly can't have 60% of our workforce on a union either. If the union existed, then that makes the grant just a gesture rather than something that helps.
I'd be curious, Luke, what is the cost you get per gram of black mass?
I've never done it per gram. People always want it in hundreds of pound increments. Let me do some
If
math
you
to
do a
convert it
100-pound
by gram.
increment, I can Google it.
We can convert 100 kilograms to a gram. I promise I'm good enough
Yeah.
at math to do that.
Yeah, divide by 100,000. Okay, let me see. Well, I guess
just curious, how do you avoid any like substantial fires and explosions and everything like this? As a person dealing with safety test on lithium for like over 20 years, I know what does it mean to shred lithium battery.
We have lots of thermal runaway calorimeters at our research and development lab that we do testing in. So I'm very aware of the joules of energy and gas released and everything. But fortunately, we cryo blast freeze before we shred, and we cryo blast freeze to between -80 to -110, depending on what type of pack it is. And at this point, there's a phase change of the solvents and the electrolyte to a phase that is, you could say not mobile, but it actually is mobile to an incredibly poor extent, kind of like a solid electrolyte.
No, it could be a solution. You're right.
Yeah.
It's a good solution. Yep.
Wait, Luke, get back to the cost per gram me or per kilo me. I can do either.
Okay, well, so what people normally want to pay for black mass is, say, between 30 to 60% of the raw material value in the black mass.
But what could be really shredded is alkaline battery, because you just added the fertilizers because it contains all zinc, iron, manganese, and you shred alkaline, and that's it.
Yep.
Create fertilizers.
Erica just reminded me, for your black mass price, they listed black mass on the international metals market now, and they broke it down into like 5 different categories so that it covers high nickel and LFP and the other the other material types in black mass. So there is a publicly traded black mass commodity price now, and that's why I was mentioning the price fluctuates with the value of stuff, because you know, it was only a month ago lithium was 3 times higher than it is today, and it was only a few months before that where nickel was 3 times higher than it is today too. So that's why they're putting it on a commodities market rather than just having a static price for it, as its value literally changes day to day.
Yeah, so just to give everybody an idea, that is $5,350 per metric ton.
Sounds about right.
which would mean I'm doing quick. It's a million grams, so it would just be 5,000 divided by 5,300 divided by, make my life simple. Divided by a million.
5 millicents per gram.
Yeah. So then you got to times that by, just so everyone knows where my math is going, usually a 21,700 weigh, or an 1850 weighs roughly 45 grams, 7 grams of that to 8 grams of that is roughly the casing, which we have to assume is in part of the black mass if you're just shredding the whole thing.
Yep.
So
And in
that
a 2170, they're 69 grams and the casing's 10 grams, sometimes 11. We've got assays of all the cells. We got their foil mass, their cathode mass, graphite mass.
So roughly 4% of your battery cost. So just to give everyone context, if you were to recycle at 18,650 and then buy the black mass before you even got into making the battery and refining the black mass into its individual components, you've already eaten 3.4% of your margin. Just
from buying the black mass to use for recycling.
just
one
buying
of the,
black mass is an input cost.
when we don't sell our black mass and we recycle our own black mass to extract the nickel, lithium, copper, we actually don't sell it back to batteries for the reason that going to battery grade, they want 6 nines purity. So 1 parts per million, an atom that's not the atom you're looking for there. And we have been able to achieve that purity, but the time and money involved to get there is so high. Batteries only recently overtook ceramics and greases as the #1 lithium consumer. So we make 4 nines purity lithium, which they consider excellent for greases and ceramics.
Yep.
And we make 4 nines purity nickel, which the steel foundries and superalloy foundries and stainless companies consider an excellent premium feedstock. Whereas to batteries, if it's only 4 nines purity and say that there's copper as contamination, it'll suppress nominal voltage, and they don't want even a few ppm copper in there.
Yeah, I mean, this again goes, thank you, Luke. You were actually driving right into my point, which was like, for battery, you can recycle it 100%. I don't think there's any way you couldn't recycle stuff inside the batteries, but recycling battery materials back into batteries is the crux. To the point
That's
you
the
pointed
hardest
out.
part. That's why we don't do that. Fortunately.
So I think that is a very valid point, guys. Like 6 nines is absolutely insane. I think the real solution there is like people have to be okay with like 200 to 300 cycles again. I think if we can get back to that world where 200 to 300 cycles is acceptable for a lithium ion battery, I think you have a more compelling argument with it.
They don't like that the watt hours is impacted by the suppression of nominal voltage by having anything other than their NCM material in their cathode. Like for example, the copper ion contamination. It's not a cycle life problem. It's a nominal voltage matching problem. Because how do you match nominals for cells that'll get paralleled in the event that you have drifting cathode metal oxide compositions?
I mean, I think the real point I'm trying to get at really is just that we have to be okay with lower tier batteries for certain applications, right? Like if people look at it from the standpoint of like the old Tesla Model S's, like you probably know this, like the original Model S's went out with maybe 300 cycles full DOD to a battery, and those cars still run today just perfectly fine.
Yeah, if you run them 100%, they would die well under 500 on gentle cycles even.
Yeah,
the original ones couldn't do CO/2 charge discharge. The cells would just crap out.
But like you still see people like putzing around, and they're like, I forget when the first Model S was, 2009?
11, I think.
So like those are like, someone at my work still has an 11 edition Model S. It still has almost its full range. It's only lost like 10%, and that's because he drives to work, he drives home, he plugs it into his 110 volt charger, and then he calls it a day. And it's just like, people need to realize the million cycle, 1,000 cycle thing is just kind of like chasing the wind. You don't really need it. Like that dude's had a Model S for 12 years, it's still fine.
Well, that brings into the, Jeff Stone thing with, with the 1,000,000-mile battery, you have a battery pack with a replaceable car. And that is not how things are done now. But like, to me, at least from an economics perspective, wouldn't the car industry love that? Oh my God, I can sell a new frame with the car around the battery every 3 to 5 years to somebody. Yes, let's do that. But that's not how they're doing it right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's being
Instead, you have a
driven-
car with the replaceable battery pack.
Well, I think a lot of it's
which
being
are
driven
not
by just
replaceable
like
right now.
the idea that you need, like, consumers unfortunately are unreasonable human beings, as we all know, and they want everything on the scale from 600 miles to a charge to 2-second fast charging to 20 to 30 C constant discharges for the life of them throughout the cell and 1% fade every 10 years. But like the reality is, if I'm a EV OEM person, I'm buying lower tier batteries to make my car cheaper because I can put them into a slightly smaller pack that gets 200 miles, make it pretty efficient, and then sell that actually so people can afford it. And then you're going to it. The problem is the cars are being built and priced for the luxury market, not the commodity or like the general consumer market. Like even the Model 3 is what, base 47?
After all the discounts.
Yeah, after discounts. I mean, guys, you can go buy a BMW. Just for context, an Audi, a Mercedes for that much money. They're not hitting Toyota market.
Something
they
hit the
are.
Toyota market for them to lose 40% of their sales or whatever over the last year. Something hit Toyota market.
Yeah, Ford is
It's
losing
called
like
stealing the
10
catalytic converters out of the Priuses. That's what's happened to the Toyotas.
Yeah.
Yes, that happens a lot in Daly City, apparently.
I had it happen to me last year in August, and I'm lucky because it only took me 2 months to get a new one. Some of them are on back order for like 12.
The catalytic converters become back order.
Yeah.
It was happening so much. There was a garage when I used to live in Daly City. There was a garage where they were installing metal plates on the bottom of the Prius
Yeah.
to prevent that from being stolen.
Yeah, I got one of those when I got mine replaced. There was a huge ring. So this was mine was stolen. I forget if it was May or August, May to August last year. And like the week afterwards, they busted this giant ring in Fremont who were stealing and selling and grinding down catalytic converters to sell the rare metals. And I was like, oh, like a week late.
Man,
Yeah,
you live in the Bay Area too?
The Bay Area had a deal where a guy who was stealing catalytic converters actually bought the metal recycler permit for like $100 from the state so that you can trade in unlimited catalytic converters. And apparently that was a loophole they weren't seeing, is if the thief just buys the permit, then they can steal as many as they want a year, and they have a license for turning them in for reprocessing.
That's crazy.
But no, that's been a big problem. I'm sure there's other problems. I haven't looked into the other reason their stock's fallen. I know that they've made announcements saying they're not going full EV. They still believe in hybrid. And I think that got them a lot of bad publicity too, but I haven't looked into it explicitly.
I agree that got them a lot of bad publicity. I think people that have already had hybrids and have tried EVs never want to go back to a hybrid.
Yes and no. I think it really depends on the charging infrastructure, right? So like I'm on my second Prius. The only thing keeping me from going to a full EV is that it's just not convenient for me to charge it anywhere. My work doesn't have one. There's 2 in my entire building complex. The lines for those are like Excel spreadsheets online for weeks in advance. And I don't want to deal with that.
Oh,
So,
that sounds terrible. You got to put a charger in it at your work. It would work great for you.
I've asked.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, and you need extreme fast charging.
I mean the bigger
Aubert-
cost is how do you deal with like you live in an apartment, where do you charge your EV?
Yeah, and I for reference, I was no longer, and now it's only 30 minutes each way, but I used to commute an hour each way each day to and from work. So I spent, between 1.75 and like 2.5 hours a day in the car driving. And so at any time for those, if I had to add like an hour pit stop or even a 30-minute pit stop to charge the car once a week. Just like absolutely not. It needs to be a 30-second transition off the freeway in 5 minutes to fill up my gas, and that's once every 2 weeks. And like that was my mindset for it. And I know that that's not, and I know that that's not realistic for EVs. And I work in the industry, but that's how I still process it, right?
Next time I have a charge station laying around and I'm going up to the bay, I'm going to stop by your lab and install it there for you.
Appreciate it. But by the way, Luke came to Spectra Power, I think 2 Decembers ago, right? And their company car is a Tesla S-Plate. And so Luke drag raced me in their company car down the street that my work is on. And I forgot what it was, but you were going like 0 to 80 in like 1.4 seconds or some crazy thing. It felt like taking off in an airplane. It was incredible.
It does 0 to 60 in 1.9 and 0 to 155 in 9.2. It's a pretty awesome car.
Yeah,
Model S Plaid is my favorite car.
And the thing that really like was amazing was he took, we were on the street, he's like, now watch this, and he hit a button and the car goes down to the ground and the seats automatically roll back, and like it feels like you're getting in a spaceship, like a Men in Black spaceship that's about to turn in from a car to like a rocket ship. It was really cool.
Glad you liked it.
All right.
Yeah, I tell people that story now like all the time.
So
Awesome.
it was great. Unfortunately, I have to go a little earlier today. It was great talking with you all. Looking forward to the next one we do and seeing all of you. So take care, everyone.
Bye,
Thank
Jeff.
you.
I can hang around a little bit longer, and just as a reminder to everybody, the slides and the video of the original